list. And there we go. Okay. Last minute questions, things you need to get out before we do this? Nope. All right. Good deal. Actually, I need to look and see. Someone say something for me.
Hello.
Something. Test.
Looks good. Okay. I'll make sure those green lights are
Something
open.
for me.
Scroll of Thoth, episode 19, October 2nd, 2014. Welcome back, everybody.
Hey, guys.
To a little bit belated episode. Didn't quite get one out in September, but it's first. We'll do two for October.
Well, it's been a very busy month.
It really has. And to culminate our busy month, we have a plethora of guests with us. Once again, we'll start with Laurelei, who is author, witch, crafts person, does
seamstress, magnificent seamstress,
presenter, publisher of Hysteria Books, writer of Temple of Love, Liber Cain, which is Guide to the Legion, and more. We also have her partner, Natalie Black, who is a professional psychic at Inner Path and also helped write some of those books. Also helps out with Hysteria Books. And we also have with us the third of the trio, Joe, who is together with all three of them. They're the main founders of Babylon Rising and Midian Camping Festival Grounds. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, guys. It's good to be back.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us back.
Yeah.
We had a great time last time.
It was fun.
It's great being friends of the show.
And my partner, who goes by Shade of Roses, could not be here tonight and is incredibly sad about it. So you're going to have to come back again in like 6 months.
All right.
We miss you, Shay.
That's the rule.
All right.
We can do that.
Fair enough.
So I'm going to start out by saying, at the beginning of this podcast, you guys didn't hear it because I edited in afterwards, but there's an introduction by our good Freder Kikos, who does the tagline for our podcast.
Aww.
It's about magic, religion, and occult counterculture.
Nice.
And I think this podcast, this episode kind of goes in that third category that we don't touch on all that much. Would you agree?
Well, we don't talk about it a lot. That doesn't mean we don't touch it.
Well, we touch it.
but then we can't talk about it.
We're talking about religion specifically or magic specifically, and we're definitely going to get to some of that. But today I wanted to talk about polyamory, which is something you guys have a lot of experience with. So
Me too.
And Colleen and
Or does that make me four?
I'm not at liberty to say the extent of my polyamorousness.
Very mysterious.
It is.
Maybe a little bit more of it will be exposed as the show goes on.
All right.
So who wants to give a definition of polyamory? Who wants to throw it out there? Who wants to talk about it? And why we're talking about it as, on the Scroll of Thought.
He started with a trick question.
Okay. Well, I'll start a little bit. First of all, I'd like to say that Joe and Laurelei and I are a closed polyamorous triad, and I'll get to what that is here in a little bit. But the reason polyamory intersects with paganism so much is because the whole term polyamory was really defined and constructed by Oberon Zell back in the early 90s. He and his primary partner, Morning Glory, put out a piece called A Bouquet of Lovers, in which they defined what polyamory was, and that got disseminated throughout the pagan community through publication Green Egg. So along with creating this big pagan movement that they had going on, they were also disseminating information about polyamory. So the two got really entwined.
Huh. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too, because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, you and I do, but I believe it was Oberon Zell again who sort of popularized the term pagan for sort of earth-based
Yes, it
religions
was.
contemporarily.
Yes.
You know, that
Yeah.
whole neo-pagan movement. We weren't calling ourselves pagan before that necessarily,
Not collectively. Yeah.
but that came earlier. I think he started using
Yeah.
that term in the 70s.
Yeah. But polyamory, he talked about being polyamorous in Bouquet of Lovers, and then polyamory got defined a couple years later, and it was the Zells that wrote the definition for, I believe, the Oxford Dictionary, and it really just boils down to having non-monogamous consensual relationships that everyone involved is aware of, is fully informed, and has consent about.
And that looks really different
Yeah.
for different tribes or different families, different.
Right,
Yeah.
because as I understand the definition and have been in many, many debates over, it may or may not involve sexual acts.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
It's because polyamory, and and this is where polyamory is a problem word. It's Greek and Latin, or rather Latin and Greek.
Right.
Because
No,
yeah,
it's Greek,
Greek
and then
and
Latin.
Latin,
Yeah.
yeah.
Poly is Greek and Latin.
poly is Greek and Latin is their
And
amor is Latin. So poly is Greek for many, and amor is Greek for loves. This does not have to be a sexual thing. This can just be, I have deep love for you, and we don't ever have to take it beyond that. But you're a part of my life. You're part of my tribe, and I love you. It's
Right. It's not necessarily, if you were going to stick with all Greek, it's not necessarily polyerotica, you know,
right.
it's polyphilia that having that deep bond.
Yeah, it really is. And I think most people nowadays define it a little more as polyerotica.
Right.
Especially with the publication of works like The Ethical Slut.
Right.
Yeah, they're really, and that came along in the later 90s and really sort of brought polyamory out to the masses and brought it out of the pagan community and into general culture.
I think the BDSM community also kind of picked up and ran with it too.
Oh yeah.
And that was before the 90s, believe me, it was before the 90s.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
And the swinger community, you know, is there are a lot of folks in the swinger community that don't identify as swingers per se, you know, don't necessarily use that word,
Right.
but feel like they fit under some version of polyamory. And like I said, there are lots and lots of different ways that this concept of polyamory manifests with people.
And we are not interested in defining your polyamory at all.
Right.
But we do know what's been working for us. We've been in this closed polytriad for 6 years now. So it seems to be working pretty well.
I like it.
Laurelei and I got married this year.
We did.
Yeah.
In those
That was awesome.
in those 2 brief days when Indiana was issuing same-sex marriage licenses.
It was
But-
beautiful.
Pretty soon it's going to be upheld by the Supreme Court. I just know it.
Yep.
So
And Joe and I have been in a long-term relationship for 11 years
11
now?
years.
11. And then Laurelei joined us 6 years ago. And
You people who are just listening at home cannot see the smiles. Cannot see the joy that is emanating from them, that they're allowed to come out and just tell people about their love.
yeah.
well, we like each other.
Yeah.
That's a very important part of polyamory, though.
You know, it really
To
is.
be able to like one another.
It is. It is.
Well-
It's more than just falling in
Well,
love.
let's split those hairs then for the definition, because like when I'm driving over here, had an interesting conversation at work, and I was asking myself, is the word polyamory just a way to say polygamy without all the old stigmas? And I don't think it is,
I don't think so
because
either.
polygamy kind of implies a marriage contract.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that polygamy is necessarily evil. the way it's been practiced a lot in this country has been horrendous. Anytime, you're imposing a relationship on someone who doesn't have the ability to truly consent is
Not okay.
horrible.
Well, I would say with polygamy, it's changed a lot recently too. I think that the Browns out in Utah have done a huge job of that. They've got the show
Sister Wives.
Sister Wives, yeah.
Well, and just if I may interject,
yeah, sure.
more Greek root words, but polygamy actually literally does mean many marriages. So, because the gamos part of it is marriage very specifically. So it's not just about relationship; it's about a contractual union.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other things that's implied with polygamy is that very, very often that is one man and several women. And
That's
while,
my objection.
And yeah, I object to that too. I object to.
I object to that.
Well, it's
That's too much pressure.
Yeah, it's usually structured as like a line marriage where it's very top down. The man is in charge, and then he has all these wives that he interacts with.
Old Testament marriage.
Yeah,
Right.
it is, and the women should not be having any kind of sexual relationship, and maybe may not even get along, and may not have a whole lot of say or agency even in what's going on or the choosing of new members of the family.
And that's one thing that I've appreciated about the show Sister Wives. They're fundamentalist Mormon, not Church of Latter-day Saints, but they're fundamentalist Mormon, and there are a lot of things about what Natalie just described that do apply to their relationship, to their marriages. But the wives in the existing marriage all get to agree on who gets brought into the family. Yeah. So it's really important to them that even if they're not absolutely best friends, that they're still
and they do,
that they're compatible.
Very much think of each other as sisters.
Sisters.
Yeah, which is a neat thing. But that's very much not what polyamory seems to encompass.
That's a
generally.
specific form of polyamory.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the opposite of that in terms of would be called polyandry, where you've got one woman who's taken several men as her husbands. And you see this pretty rarely, but I believe that the Maori
the Maori, I believe, do, and there are a couple of tribes in Africa that still practice.
And they are often what we think of as traditional gender roles are almost entirely reversed. The men become the caregivers for the children. The women are doing the work outside of the home and that kind of thing. And they sort of move around between different households very often.
Another awesome book that I'll pimp once again is Sex at Dawn, which they really go the gambit of all the different kinds of pair bondings, multiple bondings that have been through different cultures throughout time, and how this whole idea of we're meant to be monogamous is just totally bogus.
Yeah, I feel like it's a false construct. Because the thing that you end up seeing, I mean, not that there aren't great monogamous relationships, and I'm certainly not judging other people's relationships based on that, but what you see so much more often is serial monogamy. I will be with you, and then things are going to fall apart, and then I will be with somebody else, and you will be with somebody else, and we'll be monogamous, to those people, and then that relationship will dissolve, and you end up with this replacement cycle.
Monogamy with commitment.
Right.
And in the words of Tyler Durden, we're setting up franchises.
Do I get fries with that?
And I can't speak for my partners here, but I see polyamory as a kind of sexual orientation, that you're either cut out for polyamory or you're not. I think there are some people that are polyamorous and that they're sneaking around about it, that they're having affairs and trying not to get caught because they want to seek out multiple partners and relationships in their life, but they're scared that the person that they're with identifies as completely monogamous and will judge them and will be upset and will be hurt.
Not only that, but the cultural conditioning is that you should only be with one other person. So, it's this wrong and aberrant thing if you want to be with more than one. I've heard people who have talked about that it was fine for them to be either cheating on or be the one that was being cheated with, so to be the mistress or the the mister, but to be that person on the side, or that they felt comfortable cheating on their spouse, but that it was just not okay to inform them or to ask them if they could have this secondary relationship or this outside relationship.
Sex at Dawn actually pointed out a survey, the vast majority of men who had affairs said they never stopped loving their wife. They never wanted to leave their wife.
Right.
Now, just to wrap up the definition part, at the same token, cheating, going to an orgy, these are not polyamory.
No.
Right. Well, cheating isn't. Going to an orgy can be if everybody's involved and knows and is
And
consensual.
agrees.
Certainly we know plenty of folks in the poly community that do engage in play parties and that kind of thing, cuddle parties.
Certainly.
And
Part of the problem, I think, is the it's much more of an umbrella term now. It's like saying, well, paganism doesn't involve, this particular branch, but it does now. Whether it may have had roots in something else, maybe it started whatever. In this particular instance, it can do it just like any other relationship. You can be in a married, and then you decide to go to an orgy. Is there anything wrong with that? No. Does it change the idea that you guys are married? Yeah, you're still married. It doesn't change anything. Your commitment in a poly relationship is what it is between the group, as well as your boundaries and everything else. That's why I think you do have it. We are part of a greater group that might be into other, whether it's fetish or lifestyle choices, but it has nothing directly to do with the ideal of poly as a whole.
Right.
Especially not to each individual.
Well, and in terms of that, the poly community tends to be a pretty liberal, flexible bunch, They've already explored relationship boundaries for themselves. Who's to say that they wouldn't also be exploring other sexual boundaries and religious boundaries, which is why one of the reasons why, to tie it all back together, why pagans and polyamory tend to go so well together.
Well, keep in mind, I'd like to get invited to a cuddle party.
Okay.
All right.
I can put you in touch with some folks. We don't really go, but
Well, cuddling is what happens. I enjoy that. Great deal.
that's.
I mean, being single.
Yeah, a cuddle party isn't necessarily a euphemism for a, for an orgy or for a swinging play party type thing. But yeah, we know some folks that do cuddle parties.
There's even an app now called, believe it or not, Cuddler, with an R at the end, Cuddler, that you can download it to your smartphone, and it will find other people that are close to you that are on Cuddler that are currently seeking someone to give them a hug.
Well, and I heard a story on the news the other day that there's a lady, was it up in Fishers or Carmel or somewhere like that, who is putting herself out as a professional cuddler.
Yes.
I didn't see that. That's wonderful.
It's also very prevalent in Japanese culture. You can go, instead of like the typical prostitute or whatever, you would go for a session where you will cuddle with a person of your choice, and they will make eye contact with you and things like that.
Get your oxytocin fix.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah. I love my animals, but they just don't do it for me.
Right.
Right. Well,
There's something about having that, and we need it. I mean, we really need that human
touch
contact.
is really important.
Yeah, I was just listening to a podcast called Risk, and people telling stories, and this one woman, it's like, yeah, in my 30s, I'd go around and I was just like horny for anything, anyone, anywhere. And I got into a lot of bad situations. And then she finally learned, now I just get a massage once a month, and I make much better decisions.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I can see that.
But I guess my point, with the orgy thing is, you said that there's an emotional aspect to it. And certainly polyamorous people go to orgies just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody else.
But they're just as likely to as monogamous couples or as,
But, some guy getting into an orgy doesn't come out and say, I'm polyamorous now.
Right. Yeah. This is not a qualifying event necessarily.
Well, the definition of polyamory really centers to me around consent.
It does.
Yeah.
or at least information and some level of agreement.
Yeah.
Right.
And as a polyamorist, I personally think that the sexiest thing that you can have is enthusiastic consent. I mean, what's sexier than turning to someone that you're interested in and saying, I would like to do this, and them going, yes, I would like to do that too. I'd really, really like to do that with you. That's sexy.
And I would actually add that I feel that's already given. You know, you shouldn't be in any type of relationship. You shouldn't, I don't care what the definition is, without having that consent.
Yeah.
So if there's a stigma thinking of linking things to the poly because of the older concept of polygamy, that's the only reason to recap it, I guess. But to me, you shouldn't be in any relationship unless you are consenting to it in the first place, no matter what version it is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of people will say, I'm polyamorous, but my spouse doesn't want to know or be involved, but it's okay with my spouse.
Right.
That's fine.
That's still consent.
That's consent.
If that spouse has given,
Well, that's if you believe them.
Well,
Right.
there's
Very
that.
often that's a
But that-
story.
If
That's
it's
a
the
whole
truth.
other issue, though.
that's called lying.
Yeah, that's a whole other bag of worms. And I mean, it doesn't change the definition. It doesn't make it what they're doing not be polyamory. But I do worry about folks who the spouse wants to know nothing about what's going on.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder: have you bullied your spouse into allowing you to be polyamorous, but they're really
Really
monogamous,
not on board.
and now you've
And
got this.
It's the
And they're
same
not-
fears for single people. Who
It's
are
not.
dating.
It is.
It's
the
not
same-
enthusiastic consent. Yeah.
Necessarily, and it may be. I
Right,
mean, it's
yeah.
just these are just sort of worries that pop up in my own mind. You know.
And it is not our job or anyone else's. We are not the polyamory police. We are not going to tell you what the right way to do polyamory is. We've seen all kinds of structures. There's V's where there are two people involved with one other person, but the first two people aren't involved. There are N's, that are like two V's together. There's quads where you get two couples that hook up. We're
There's DNA strains.
yeah. There's,
Double helixes. Yeah.
and we're a triad, and we're a triangle in the sense that all three of us are in a relationship together, and Laurelei and I are in a relationship, and Laurelei and Joe are in a relationship, and Joe and I are in a relationship.
Yeah. So, and we've pointed this out several times to people that are not poly, that means that there are 4 relationships that are
Yes.
happening just right there. There's
Yeah.
the relationship between person A and B, between person B and C, between A and C, and then between A, B, and C. Because the relationship between all 3 of us looks different, feels different, doesn't necessarily have different rules, but it just has a different
Right, it's
feel
just
than the
different.
relationship
Yeah.
that any 2 of us have.
And,
So you add in another person, and then you end
it
up
gets exponentially
Yeah.
bigger. With
get more complicated.
every person that you add. I do know that the quad system seems to fall apart pretty spectacularly.
Well, yeah, often based on my observation.
Yeah, on observations that I've had in the past.
What I've seen there very often is that you start with, couple number 1 and couple number 2 come together to be a quad. And then it's like everybody just sort of switches who their primary partner is and then splits off again. So you end up with a new couple number 1 and couple number 2 who are no longer together.
Well, and you used a term that back in the day when I was really active in the lifestyle, that we used a lot, and there was primary.
Right.
And in probably the longest relationship I had a primary relationship with a gentleman who also had other relationships. But because I was primary, then I was informed, and we're not talking about never being informed, but it's like, I would like to go away for a weekend with person C.
Mhm.
Are you comfortable with that? And those kinds of things. And I don't hear that term so much. And maybe it's just because I'm not really active anymore.
I still hear it a fair amount. What I end up hearing that with are folks that are in bigger pods or bigger
Yeah, bigger
tribes
tribes,
than
yeah.
us. We're all primary to each other,
Or it's from where you have a not quite an equal V. You might have an elongated V where you have the primary couple who have one or more others that might
like
be part
play
of it.
partners,
Well, no,
secondary or even tertiary.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily be play. I mean, they
Right.
can still be, but they're just not considered. Some people, that's part of their stepping stone, or that might be the maximum they'll ever get, is that this is the primary relationship, and we have these additional loves in our life, and we have our arrangement and agreements with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love about it. You know, you guys are heroes. You really are. You're standard.
Stop.
You're standard bearers of the new Aeon, and you know where there's this idea that human love has this multitude of expression that's just beyond count, really, of how people express love and feel love amongst each other, and polyamory accepts all of it.
Right.
And Heinlein continually wrote about that.
He did. Yeah,
Yes,
he did. Well, and in fact, to go back to over on Zell, a lot of what he did was modeled off of what he'd read in Heinlein.
Yeah, Stranger in a Strange Land was the book that Zell used.
Right. His Church of
to
All
get
Worlds
these
was based on the
ideas.
Church of All Worlds in that book, and
This is-
and the polypods that are.
What's
that
primary
is-
from? Was that ethical slip? Or-
I mean, I think that term had been around before, but they do write a lot about primary and secondaries and all that kind of thing in the ethical
Even
slide.
the idea of being water brothers and in pagan ritual, there's often that phrase, you know, when you're passing around the liquid sacrifice of never thirst. That's a direct reference to Stranger in a Strange Land.
I'm
So
going to come out, and this is going to bite me in the ass someday. So Shade and I, by definition, we're primary, but there's another couple that we are with sometimes, but they don't live with us.
Right.
So
Right on.
there's that gambit too.
Mhm.
yeah.
It does, and it changes things to
It
live
does.
with, you know, your poly tribe or pod, whatever that looks like. You know, and very often, like one of the things that I see a lot, and I'm actually thinking of sort of a larger poly family, but almost everybody's sort of paired off into their primary relationships, and that's who they live with and live their lives with every single day. But then they make space and time in their lives for the other members of the relationship, who are often the folks that are living in that other house over there that are primaries with each other, you know. And so there's a lot of this interacting.
And in our small commune, we had 2 sets of primaries, but we were not together.
Oh, Andy.
Andrew. And so my partner and I, who were primary to one another, lived there. And then very good friends who, in a loose definition, non-sexual definition, were polyamorous with us because we were a family. They were polyamorous as well, and they were what they called a bonded pair, fluid bonded pair. But we never exchanged partners between the 4 of us.
Right. And to that end, we're a closed.
Andy, I'm sorry.
He's very excited.
He is.
Yeah, that'll.
Would you close the door?
I think I'm closer.
Anybody?
Too much excitement.
Yeah, we have feral cats in the neighborhood.
There we go.
Something shakes. And you settle. 10 seconds. Maybe. Are you done? Are you done? You're on patrol.
Andy,
He didn't go out or anything, does he?
he doesn't.
All right. I forgot what we were talking about.
I remember.
Okay.
So yeah, we're a closed triad, which means that we're not seeking other partners. We're not really interested in having other partners. We like this relationship just as it is. But one of our friends was talking about that she's polyamorous where her friends are concerned. Like she's got these really deep friendships that are, you know, very family based. And we've got, especially through the winter when my parents are snowbirding down in Florida, we tend to have a a fair amount of our really close community come and living with us over the winter, you know, and I know from my perspective that even though these are not people that I'm engaged with in any kind of sexual way, that they're definitely people that I consider, you know,
family, and we have love for them. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome. What other questions do we have? You haven't asked much. You're the other expert.
Well, I don't know whether I'm an expert or not, but
Is anyone an expert?
you know, following that same idea, I find myself in multiple polyamorous relationships on that level. And I mean, they are deeper, much, much deeper than I could ever define the term friendship, because that's not what it's about. To me, they are more family than virtually any of my actual family members.
Indeed.
And I would do things for them, and you know, there's just no limit to how I would sacrifice for these people.
right.
And we consider that to be a non-sexual polyamorous relationship.
And that's another thing that I think overlaps really well with the pagan community, because you get those kinds of relationships in covens and in magical working groups that have been together for a long time. So there's already that familial bond with these people from working magic with them for a long time. And then polyamory can be an outgrowth of that kind of relationship.
And in other ways too, even without having that that coven or hearth sort of relationship, a lot of us are, I mean, frankly, a lot of us are the black sheep in our families. You know, we are the sore thumb that doesn't, you know, that's always sticking out. We don't quite fit in, and we can love our birth families, you know, our biological families, or the families that raised us. You know, we can love and admire them, and still not necessarily want to be a part of what they're doing.
Right.
But we've got these really deep shared interests, shared beliefs, shared willingness to let you do you, you know, that a lot of us don't find within our families. So there's just sort of a stronger bonding there that happens. I hear a lot from people within the pagan community, you know, I finally found my family.
Now, obviously, there's nothing new going on here. This has all been done for centuries, except we're, you know, in the lucky position of being in a time and place where we could actually talk about it openly,
Right.
somewhat openly, mostly openly.
Mostly openly.
In our shrouded little corner of the internet.
You know, I wouldn't bring it up at work. But do you think that what the pagan community is experiencing, it may be an outgrowth of a deliberate attempt by the propaganda industry to really divide us on a cultural level?
No, I think that it's part of the cultural creative movement in general, that there are a huge group of cultural creatives that are living on the fringe, that are interested in pushing the envelope, that are looking for our own answers instead of the way things have always been done. We're really questioning what fits for us and what doesn't. And we're going to some of us are coming up with answers like paganism, like polyamory, you know, like group living situations. And we're trying to change culture on a very foundational level.
Well, the whole idea about co-creation that has been around for, I mean, it really began to be more active in the 70s. And, you know, that has nothing to do with paganism.
Right.
That has nothing to do expressly with polyamorous relationships. Right. I'm not saying that they don't ever develop or that they don't ever choose a different religion, but it's not about that. Right. It's about that ability to live together in tribe, in group, and recapture some of the way that life was in the past, when we were more in touch with the land and the spirits, whatever you call those spirits.
But don't you think that there's a lot of people who would otherwise get a lot of these needs fulfilled by their actual family, except their family has just totally ostracized them. I mean, I've known a lot of people who just get thrown out of their family just for being gay.
Right.
They have to rebuild a family somewhere.
I believe paganism is one of the reasons that it's linked, because it's so open. It is so welcoming. You can almost come out to any type of meetup, whatever, and say, and we had this happen before, whatever version of paganism. All right, that's what you do. Thanks for sharing, And I think that your lifestyles and all these other things are very welcoming. So if you find a lack in, say, your own life or in your family life, you gravitate towards this new type of family. But as you already mentioned, this is something that's not necessarily older than paganism, but definitely the social roots of it has started outside of a religion aspect.
Older than neo-paganism, I guess we could
Right.
say. Paganism is pretty.
But also, I want to make sure that we understand the point. Now, because I'm so open in the community and, listed in branches and all over the internet and those kinds of things, I get a call from a certain gentleman about every 6 months. He apparently thinks that I don't recognize his voice. And he calls up and he wants to convert to paganism because then it would be okay to be part of the open sexual movement. And he's not the only person that somehow thinks that paganism means that we have no sexual mores.
Right.
I don't know. He's both right and wrong. I mean, he believes, that, and he, I believe that you can be a Christian and be polyamorous, but if you go by what it says in the stupid book, you can't. Well, depending on which part of the stupid book you read.
Right. If you're looking at the older part of the book, then you're fine.
Basically, according to the way Christianity is practiced in modern America by most denominations, you cannot. So, maybe he's looking for an out. Maybe he's more afraid of going to hell than he is of,
I don't think he's interested in being polyamorous. I think he's interested in just having other sexual partners.
He just wants to get a freak on.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And
Which is fine. He just needs to forgive himself, not even forgive himself. He needs to accept that that's part of who he is and that he doesn't need to impose judgment on himself for that.
And that apparently he has a religious component tied up with his sexuality that maybe he should explore.
Yes, and I tell him that repeatedly.
I blame Christianity.
Well, they're an easy target to blame for sure.
They are, but
They've made themselves a big target.
I think it's a bigger problem than just Christianity.
It is.
I blame personal responsibility, because that's where I always hold it. If you agree to this belief system and you want to do something else, that's your self-imposed.
Yep.
Right. And personal responsibility is sort of at the heart of all of
And
this.
you put the chains on yourself, you can break them.
I was having a conversation the other day inside the walls with a gentleman in the Asatru group. And Asatru is based on a code of honor, the 9 noble virtues, which we've talked about before. But responsibility is primary up there, way up at the top. And he's sitting there with his hands behind his head like this, talking about all the babies he'd fathered on so many different women. And I said, and what about supporting those children? Oh, well, that's why I only pick smart women to have my babies with so that their mothers can go out and take care of them.
Huh.
And
How noble of him.
Yes.
No sarcasm, folks.
But we talked about that level of responsibility, and that is very important in a polyamorous relationship. Because the more people you add to a relationship, the broader the responsibilities get and the harder they become to balance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You got to take the good with the bad. This is why Shade is not here today, because she's at the hospital with our friend who's sick, and you just can't. Someone you love, you're not gonna just leave them in a hospital.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's something I think most poly people would agree on, is that whenever you add somebody to it, you're not just adding it by one, it doubles.
Yeah.
Right.
The responsibility, the love, the commitment, the good and bad. it gets exponentially harder to maintain, but the people that it fits for, the more you add seems to exponentially increase also your enjoyment of life and things like that. But it's one of the problems is you can't define something so broad, but also so individual. What works for us may never work for anybody else in the world, and vice versa. So it's almost impossible to put a how-to book to proper poly.
Well, one of the things I wanted to bring up is we've talked a lot about the definition and the problems and the suppositions. Tell us from your perspective about the benefits.
Besides the good sex, because what's the problem? There's good sex.
How about compersion? This is an awesome thing. Okay, compersion is this thing that really only happens in a polyamorous relationship. Compersion is the feeling that I feel when Joe and Laurelei go off and enjoy themselves together, and the joy that I get from knowing that they're both really happy together. I
didn't know that was the term, but I understand that.
It's a great feeling. It's the opposite of jealousy. It's awesome.
And that is something of primary importance to me.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, and you're right. That's the kind of thing. It's a different sort of feeling, I guess, because I can relate it to feelings of joy, knowing, for instance, that my children are doing things that are happy and making them happy, even if I'm not involved. I don't have to be there with them doing the happy making thing to be really grateful and fulfilled that they're doing the happy making thing.
Because you love them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in terms of relationship, in terms of romantic relationship, emotional relationship, you don't get that very often with other types of. It's even a difficult thing sometimes to come by within a poly group. There are times when your feelings of jealousy do get triggered.
I know you can't make any sweeping statements about polyamory for everybody, but I'm going to go ahead and make one. There will always be jealousy of some sort, even if it's minor, even if you work through it. That jealousy is going to come up.
Love is infinite. Unfortunately, time is not.
Right. Yeah. And space on this planet is not. So, there are times when any two of us need to go and do something and the other can't. They've got a work commitment, or they've got another commitment with a person in the family, or that kind of thing. And it's hard not to feel left out sometimes. But there's also, and this is one of the benefits, there's also that great knowledge and knowing, and that sort of security and safety and knowing I can go take care of this thing. And you can take care of this other thing that we as a household need to do. And there are three of us to be able to divide up what otherwise might only be one or two of us in a traditional relationship. So,
or if I need to go out of town, I know that there's someone taking care of the other person's needs.
Right. Yes. And we've had that a few times. Joe's gone to help family, and it's and for an extended period of time, a couple of times. So and during those times, I think either Natalie or I, who have never lived on our own, I mean, that's probably a thing worth noting as I say this next part, we've never lived in a house, in an apartment just by ourselves. Right. So, and we live, we live in Martin, Indiana. I mean, it's our neighbors routinely shoot off cannons and
fully automatic rifles.
So, and that happened once actually when Joe was gone. But the fact that we were there together in the house just adds that sort of level of, I'm watching out for you and you're watching out for me, and I don't have to sleep with the light on and one eye open.
Yeah.
Back in the early 70s, when we had, when I think of it now, they were polyamorous relationships, although at that time the term was not there.
Right.
And everybody would come to our house on the weekend and stay the weekend, sometimes the long week. Sometimes in the middle of the night, people would show up and you'd find people sleeping on the sofa or the children in the bed with the other children, because they'd driven a long time. And one, it was never a question of who might be coming or going, because you didn't really need to know. They were family. We were there for one another, but we had a lot of little kids between us.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that there was always somebody
Yeah.
who you could trust
Yeah.
with the children. I mean, really trust with the children made life a lot easier.
Absolutely.
If you believe it takes a village to raise a child, and I do, polyamory is a really awesome way to have a village.
You know, it's hard to say this succinct, you know, with absolute certainty, but I personally believe that the natural human condition is that tribal polyamory, raising children together, not the nuclear family, not the property-oriented marriage.
Right. Well, and that certainly feels the most natural to me. And I know we live in a 3-generation household. My kids don't live with us. Our kids don't live with us at this point all the time. They're both at their father's house now. But for about 3 years, our daughter lived with us, and my parents live with us. So we've actually got an up to 7-person 3-generation household.
With friends rotating in and
With
out
friends
as well.
rotating in and out, yeah.
And probably animals.
There are.
There are animals.
Yeah. Well, we don't have a menagerie or anything, but
We got rid of the hedgehog.
we did, yeah. Yeah, but cats and rabbits and there was a hedgehog. So, yeah.
I kind of meant that sometimes, you know, when people would come to my house, their animals would come with them.
Right, and we've
So
had that
that was part of it.
to some extent, but we have a cat that is very intolerant of other animals. He's not
No.
poly at all, no.
My cat is a very monogamous cat. He belongs to me.
He is, and he maintains his boundaries very well.
He's very clear about his boundaries.
Because he will cut you in the face.
He will.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of people there, and you know, just within our household, when all of the adults are at home and the kids are there are 5 adults and 2 kids, which means that my kids get a lot more supervision than a lot of kids do, I think, in today's society. And I'm really grateful for that. I mean, I can't think of the last time that my kids were actually with a babysitter, you know, that they were with somebody that wasn't
In our household.
or even at their father's house, because he's got his family very close too. They all pretty much live in the same town. So, you know, it's brothers that are watching his kids or our kids when they're there.
Our household almost never sleeps either.
That's true. There's almost always somebody awake in our household because Natalie maintains a fairly early schedule, and Joe and my dad both maintain really, really late schedules, and my stepmother and I kind of rotate in between those.
And for our listeners, especially our young listeners who feel like they're out in their own, you know, out in whatever rural America, and they'll never get to experience any of this. This is all going on in Martinsville, Indiana.
It is.
It is
It
a
is.
tiny
town.
town
Backward town.
known for its deep, conservative, racist roots.
Known for being the most backwards redneck town in Indiana. It really is.
And to live there, we've seen a lot of those stereotypes carried out, and we've also seen a lot of those stereotypes shattered.
Yes.
When Natalie and I got married, the judge had flung open the courtroom doors. As soon as the word came down, she said, absolutely, yes, I am performing ceremonies for same-sex couples. And she ordered, you know, she made sure that the clerk was issuing those licenses. And she kept court open late to be able to get us all in. So, and she's been a member of that community for probably 3 decades.
Yes.
You know, she's been a judge in that town.
There's
So
questions of light in here.
there really are. It's known for being racist and backwards and redneck, but not everybody that lives there is that way. It is coming along. It just may take it a while to get past its bad reputation.
And meetup.com, people. You can find other people where you are. Get it out there. The internet is an amazing tool. There are polyamorous meetups all over the country, all over the world.
And there's a great poly group that meets here in Indianapolis. They have a social gathering once a month and an education type class. They call it the P's, the Poly Education and Action, something that starts with an S. I'm not sure.
Maybe symposium. I don't
know.
But
But they have a class on what it means to be poly, and they have different presenters or different speakers from within the poly community talk about these topics, including raising children together, including setting up households, including figuring out how to use Google Calendar so that you can get, which is an important thing. I mean, that's a difficult thing, especially again, the larger your family gets, the more challenging it is to know who's doing what and when.
Yeah, when you get together.
And with whom.
And I'm glad you brought that up because you guys mentioned Green Egg and that being essentially a fanzine.
Mhm.
Where they started,
Yeah.
but the internet has really made it possible for a lot of people to come out and talk about it.
Well, and thank goodness for meetup.com. As Natalie mentioned,
yes.
I mean, I didn't come here intending to plug Meetup, but, Meetup, I wish that there had been Meetup when I first started getting involved with paganism. And that was, back in the mid to late 90s. The internet was new. So we were all relying on BBSs.
Exactly.
And even then, I mean, we ended up doing what was essentially Meetup, getting people in a local area coming together.
Saying, let's meet at this cafe and
Right.
so that we can talk.
Right.
I
You
thought I
can
was
go
the only
ahead
one.
and pimp Meetup. I use Meetup too.
I love it.
$20 a month is excessive, but
If you got on early enough, it's only 10.
Yeah.
Because I'm one of the
Yeah.
Joe, one of them.
Yeah, Joe's one of those early people that got involved with
Early
Meetup.
She's an early adopter.
But if you're using it for file storage, it's essentially unlimited file space. So
Never
And
trust the
it's
cloud.
becoming-
But it is. It's wonderful. I mean, you had mentioned Frater Kikos, who did the tagline for the show. We know him through the OTO, and there's the Lemic meetup that happens here in Indianapolis every month. And
And it's tomorrow night.
is it?
It is tomorrow night at
Fri-
Hubbard and Cravens.
Friday night, right?
Yeah,
that was at
tomorrow,
Calvin
Friday.
Fletcher's.
It's Friday night.
Whatever night. It's this week.
Where's
It's
it
this
at?
week. Hubbard and Cravens?
That was at Calvin Fletcher's.
Maybe it's at Calvin
I
Fletcher.
think it's
Anyway.
I think it's at
Check the
Calvin.
internet.
It's at Calvin Fletcher's, I think, and it's on Friday night. That's the Arabica Mystica.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
Um,
over there in Fountain Square.
Yeah,
I met a lot of people through that meetup. I met Colleen through that meetup.
Yeah.
through that meetup.
Yes.
Excellent.
We used to sit at the table and argue constantly.
That's how great friendships are
That's
made.
how the podcast started.
That's how the podcast started. We can argue in front of a microphone. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
That's how some of the best friendships are made.
All right. Believe it or not, we are coming up on an hour.
Oh wow.
Wow.
It was that fast.
Oh my goodness.
And
Not
we barely touched the subject, really. There's so
Really,
much
yeah.
more
Yeah.
we could be talking
We go
about.
deep with this one.
So we didn't get to talk about any other stuff we want to talk about, but that's fine. That's the reason to have you back. But before we do end, do you guys have things you want to sum up, things you really want to say about polyamory, about your experience, anything?
I guess I would say that there's no particular one right way to do it. And about the only wrong way to do it is not to communicate and not to be honest. That's really what's needed to have a successful relationship of any type, even if it's just, I mean, frankly, I think the relationship that you have with yourself, you need to be communicating with yourself. You need to
And be honest.
honest. Yeah. And we all have our blind spots. I get that. But as responsible people working toward being even better responsible people, being true to ourselves, that honesty is really important. And you can't have a good relationship. I don't care what you're going to call it if you're not honestly communicating with everybody that's involved.
Exactly.
In addition to what Laurelei said, if you're interested in polyamory, educate yourself a little bit about it. Talk to other people that are in the lifestyle or that are interested in it, because people have already made a whole lot of mistakes. You don't have to make the same mistakes. So get out there online. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of resources. Go to the meetup groups, talk to people, ask questions, and get informed.
Listen to the podcast. There are
Well, we
podcasts specifically about polyamory.
Well, we have
Right.
some links on the site about some good polyamorous links to go to.
Yes.
I'll
Google.
Yeah.
Google is my friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe.
One thing I would probably sum up with is make sure the reasons you want to be poly, because if you're coming in a poly going, I hear that there's a lot of great sex, whatever, you can do these things, any of these outside, whether fetish, whether lifestyle choices, whether you're poly or not. So sometimes people will take on the extra work for something they thought they were going to get out of it. You know, I want to get into threesomes, so I must be poly. Well, you can probably find that such thing without being poly,
Right.
and probably easier with
Yeah.
less work.
If all you're looking for is sex.
Yeah, this is the hard way to go about getting that.
There's Craigslist, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how far down you want to go.
That just sounds terrifying.
Just be honest with what you want.
Right.
So do you guys have anything exciting coming up? Any activities?
Yeah.
Oh, you're not?
Well, Midian at the end of October will be having its first ever Hallows event. That's the weekend of Halloween.
Mhm.
It's our Samhain event, and we're going to be having a psychic there and a costume parade. It's very family friendly.
One of the big things on Friday night, a lot of people want to take their kids trick-or-treating, but also want to go to a festival. What we're doing on this one is allowing anybody to go trick-or-treating. Usually people go in, what I'm being told in this area, since I'm from Ohio, is that when it's still light out, you go trick-or-treating, whatever, you can load up the kids, come down, and we have stuff in place. There's going to be a kid activity till midnight, tons of stuff going on. And we're going to have our security ghouls be ready to help out, and you'll have hot cider and everything ready to go.
Hold a
set up,
flashlight for you while you set up your tent in the dark, even if that's how you're coming in.
and
so.
very hot fires all around. There's going to be 2 or 3 different ones where you can keep warm and things like that.
You guys handed me a list of stuff that you do, which is massive.
We
Massively
stay
impressive.
busy.
So I'm
We're
gonna
the
go
hardest
down.
working
I'm gonna
people
go
in
down this
Vegas.
list.
I am very much of the opinion that if you are saying, why doesn't somebody do this? It's because you are the one being called to do the thing.
Yes.
So do it.
I'm gonna go down this list, and I'm gonna ask the person who I think would give me the good answer.
Okay.
Okay. Camp Midian. What is that, Joe?
Camp Midian is a project of 10 partners, 10 equal partners, who came together with their families to form a new festival event ground that I like to say we have learned from our mistakes and others to allow festivals to come in affordably and be had. We're presenting a lot of our own, of a wide spectrum of topics and belief systems and whatnot, as well as we're open to everything. Now I feel like I'm plugging the business. Weddings and bar mitzvah. No.
And you can find out about that campmidian.com. All this stuff will be in the show notes. Blade and Broom, Laurelei.
Blade and Broom Botanica is the shop that Natalie and I started. Well, very technically, I started it before I ever met Natalie, but we got it off the ground together. It's largely an Etsy shop, although I'm looking at eventually moving off of Etsy. But right now, most of my customer base comes from Etsy, and it's all magical wares. I make a lot of potions, and I say potions, but hoodoo, conjure oils, traditional witchcraft oils and formulas, waters, lots of incense, lots of robes. This is where I sell my robes and cloaks.
Flying ointment?
I do make flying ointment. I make a very nice non-toxic flying ointment.
What about the other kinds?
Well, I'm just starting to educate myself enough to be able to experiment with that, but there are so many deadly drugs involved in traditional flying ointment, belladonna and henbane. And
Datura is not something you should play with.
you should not play with Datura
Or belladonna.
or belladonna.
Or bleach.
Or bleach, yeah. Which is not in any of my flying ointment formulations. But yeah, that's where my crafting for fun and profit comes out.
Awesome. American folkloric witchcraft.
Okay. AFW is our tradition, Laurelei and I's magical tradition of witchcraft. We practice a Cochranian strain of witchcraft. We're very interested in this very experiential, shamanistic way of working with witchcraft. There's a strong tradition behind it, but we are interested in incorporating American forms of witchcraft into this tradition, and that's what we practice. We have a extensive blog dedicated to the subject.
I've read it. It's
Yeah,
fucking
it's
awesome.
afwcraft.blogspot.com.
And probably another one that's getting tossed out to you, Inner Path.
Inner Path is a New Age store and metaphysical store down in Greenwood, Indiana, on 31, and I give readings there on Mondays and Tuesdays. And they are a great shop. They have some of the most amazing gemstone jewelry in the city. We have great psychics, and I'd love it if you come to talk with me, and I'd really love it if you got a reading.
Asteria Books.
Asteria Books is the publishing house that Natalie and I run. We created Asteria Books with the concept of making my own books available. I'm kind of a control freak, and I wanted that complete creative control. Additionally, a lot of what I write is sort of niche market. So with it, it's not even broad general paganism. It's more specific within that. I didn't necessarily want to go through a Llewellyn, or, I mean, I would love to be picked up by Weiser or something like that. They're a really reputable book source, but I do like having control. Yeah. So Natalie is our graphic designer. She does our covers, some of our interiors, almost all of the artwork that goes throughout the books. I do most of the editing, and so far most of the writing, although we have published other authors as well. And we're open to that. We accept submissions. And we have a very nice competitive contract for, among the small presses that are available.
Cool. And I would personally recommend to my Chaos Magic friends, which is Key to the Legion. It's a very unique and interesting take on Goetia.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Joe, Babylon Rising. Wow.
Just getting the hard ones.
We had a whole podcast on that last time.
Reference that.
It was fun.
It was.
As yet again, another almost, what are we up to now? Technically 10 years,
10 years.
But 9 straight. Another grassroots Thelemic festival that started with a core of founders that expanded out to a greater amount of organizers to bring all forms of Thelema together and allow it to explode.
Let's see what'll happen.
And very, very much this many wills. You know, the Pan-Thelemic subtitle is really meant, at least from my perspective, it's really about bringing the greater wills into line with each other and allowing them to mix into this awesome cauldron of festival and agape. And
it's not just the OTO. It's not just.
It certainly isn't.
It's not just. That's one of our pillars.
Right.
It's very much a pillar. A lot of good people. It's a very good organization. We're all part of it. But it's not just that. No, we have the chaos community. It's expanded. We're now up to 3 tracks with the Scarlet Magic and Chaos. That could expand. We're open to all kinds of things. That doesn't fit any one category sometimes. But yeah, it's growing. It's very much online on that. You might want to throw anything else in.
No, it feels good.
No, I think you said it very
Hopefully I will
well.
be you going to present next year? Do you know?
Hopefully I won't be sick next year. Yes.
Yeah. Kadishti.org.
Well, and that was a topic we didn't get to get
That's
to
the
today.
topic we didn't get to.
But
Darn, we got to come back.
Kadishti is a Canaanite term for the priestesses and and priests of sacred sexuality, sacred love. In the Middle East, in the ancient Middle East, and translating a little bit into ancient Greek practice through Aphrodite's worship, there were what we would call today temple prostitutes. That's not the term that they had for them. They were just priestesses or priests of sacred sexuality, and that was a way of communing with the goddess, specifically the goddess Astarte or Aphrodite, Ishtar. And Kadishti.org is a gathering place for links related to lots of different Kadishti paths. There are several different people, a lot in the Midwest, interestingly. There are a lot of Kadishti practitioners here in the Midwest. A lot of the sort of movers and shakers in the movement are centered right here in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. So it's an amalgamation of links and resources for somebody that's interested in pursuing the Kadishti path.
And you have your own personal website, LaurelaiBlack.com.
I do, yeah. As a writer and author, that's mainly what that website's focusing on, is my work, writing about Aphrodite and writing about witchcraft,
Cool.
which are my two greatest magical passions.
Last go around, if people want to get in touch with you on social media, what's the best place?
Natalie Black 156 is my Facebook page, and also I run a blog at Glauc's Nest at blogspot.com. That's GLAUX Nest, like a bird nest at Blogspot.
You need to add that to the list.
Yes,
You
sir.
can add that.
Laurelei Black is my username on Facebook, and I've got an author page if you just want to follow my updates or friend me and we can chat. I always like talking to people about any number of topics.
When you have an internet connection out there in the middle of nowhere.
I know, yeah. That is a challenge. It is. It's pretty spotty.
Joe?
Iron Black on Facebook, Joe at campmidian.com, and Magic with a K at BabylonRising.org. We're all possible contacts.
Well, since we're doing it, do yours, Connie.
Oh, well, I'm just wooglet@gmail.com or Colleen Kelly on Facebook. And I've got a couple of things coming up in October. 10 years ago, some woman was going to start a cups group here
What?
Who would do
in
that?
Indiana.
They must have been insane.
And I had just moved here to Indiana and got wind of it. And I showed up at the meeting. And of course, that was Laurelei. And somehow I inherited the group. And we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year.
That is so exciting.
We are going to have a reunion party
Oh, yay.
in either late October or early November at a public place. And we're going to invite everybody who's been on the list for years and years and years just to come back and get in touch with one another.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And then on All Saints Eve, All Hallows Eve, I will be doing tarot readings at Tin Comet Coffee from 2 to 5, just kind of to get in the spirit of things.
Wonderful.
In the spirit.
Yeah.
So to speak. Very nice. Very nice.
That's
Excellent.
wonderful. I had not realized, you're right, it's been 10 years. I didn't realize it had been 10 years.
Congratulations.
Yay.
Yeah. I got nothing new coming out right now, but the plethora of social media.
But he does have an excellent novel that you should read.
I have a couple books.
My Babylon. And I love his short story. What's the name of it? The one that I love so much?
I don't know. Which one did you love so much?
It's the one with Loki in it coming in at the end.
Oh,
Spoilers.
Loki doesn't come in at the end, but of Little Faith.
Of Little Faith. I love it.
It stars Odin, Loki, Satan, and Aleister Crowley. I mean,
And
how
it's
can you go wrong?
It's far too short.
Sounds like a spectacular idea for a short story.
I want him to turn it into a book.
Yeah.
Yikes. I think Neil Gaiman already wrote that book. You can get in touch with me at jameslwilbur.com, James L. Wilbur on Facebook, scrollthoth.com, scrollthoth.tumblr.com. magicalrecord.tumblr.com, and I just signed up for LO.
Oh,
Did you?
Where's my invite?
Good for
I'll
you.
work on that.
I think there's going to be a mass exodus
Yeah.
from Facebook.
And I'm
so-
James L. Wilbur on LO. I'm actually using my real name, but I may make alternate accounts to talk about freakier things. But all of our listeners, please come to the website, get the show notes for all those links that we talked about. You can use our Amazon search window there on the right. If you're going to Amazon, just use that. You get the same Amazon. We get a couple pennies. We also have a PayPal button there, and we ask for pitiful donation of $1 a show. If you were entertained for an hour, throw us $1. You can call us with questions, observations, anything you want to say at 317-296-3247. And I think that is it. We've got it covered. Music.
Thank you so much for having us
Yes,
back.
thank you.
Yeah, we have the best time.
And we're sometime before Babylon Rising.
Yes.
Yes.
Music provided by Shoebox Recordings. The intro was a selection from Journey by Coben, and behind us right now is Hair Dye by East Coast. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Yay.
Now I have to let Andy go.